I don't want to burst anyone's bubble here, so if you believe in those haunted lost episode legends and enjoy living in that world, maybe this post isn't for you. Now, don't get me wrong, I hate it when people complain about the lack of realism in entertainment, and I also think that all kids should believe in Santa and the Tooth Fairy for as long as possible. But this is different. Now, back in the 80s, I met this dude, Sid, who used to cut old VHS tapes and shit. It was more than a hobby for him. It was pretty much his entire life. His parents were more wealthy than I'd been blessed with, so when we were teenagers, I was slaving away at a Scats. Yes, Scats, fast food restaurant. He just hung out around the house cutting tapes all day and night. Of course, as you get older, things in your past become a bit clearer, and I think he might have been borderline autistic, no joke, or maybe just a very high-functioning person with Asperger's. But of course, I'm no expert, and I'm not saying that is the case either. It's just the best and quickest way I can think to explain his personality and this obsession with the cutting of the tapes. Cutting tapes, and you guessed it, cutting tapes. It all started when he saw the movie Old Yeller as a kid, and for whatever reason, his parents let him watch that shit. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's a tale of a boy and his dog, and I hope I don't have to announce spoiler in such an old-ass movie, but in the end, the boy has to shoot his own dog in the head because it's rabid. Sid didn't appreciate this. His dad photographed and videotaped the wedding, so he showed Sid how to operate some of the machines. And Sid cut out the ending, replacing it with an earlier, happier scene, as if Old Yeller suddenly got better off screen. He watched his tape obsessively, and even into his early teens when I first met him, he made me watched it once to show how he fixed it. And I could actually picture him as a little boy once he started applauding and cheering at its own foxed editing. And I don't want to say I was a bad influence after I saw it, but I asked if he could do it with other movies as well. My major interest was perhaps taking a film or two and cutting in some nude frames of an actress that hadn't really been done. Don't worry though, I'd never had him actually do it. I had never had the guts to actually ask if he would. I just imagine how cool it would be. Often. Sid told me that yes, he could fix any movie he wanted to, and in fact he had done it with a few others. He had a copy of the Ghostbusters cartoon, and I shit you not, every single ghost is completely removed. The story made no sense, there was no continuity, but he had accomplished it, and I was very impressed. I guess in the time of VHS, the things seemed more magical than it does nowadays. As time went by, I encouraged Sid to edit more and more movies, but with different purposes. Instead of whitewashing all the scary stuff like he wanted to do, I got him to see the light of what he could do, and how awesome he could make things. Somewhere out there, this chubby Star Wars nerd from our high school has all 3 films flawlessly cut together, with editing effects that would have made George Lucas himself cry out, "Enough meddling!" We charged him like $20 for the only copy, because we're idiots. Anyway, this went on for a while before I lost my interest in it. It was more of a goof for me than it was for him. This was the point where I started working, started driving, and started taking bases with the local girls. While he just got more and more involved with the cutting of these tapes. Now, I think his favorites were cartoons, and when The Simpsons came around, he went apeshit with those. Now, his edits weren't so much about fixing things as they were about breaking them in interesting ways. Now, another thing that kind of sticks out in my mind is when he recorded an episode of MASH, or M-A-S-H, and had cut it with a gory old war flick. Halfway through his version, though, the camp gets bombed, soldiers invade, and everyone dies. At the end, he also specifically worked into faces with freeze frames of each cast member with their eyes closed. He had completely revised his interest and embraced what once terrified him: scary endings. He seemed to be in love with the things like drawn out sequences with terrifying silences. He'd even make me be quiet while they played too. Now, you may have heard of a mysterious fellow named Banksy who goes around creating interesting graffiti and whatnot. At one point, he even went into a music store and replaced a Paris Hilton CD with his own fakes. Banksy had nothing on Sid. Every other week, he'd tell me about how he went to some video rental store and replaced his own tapes with the ones that they had. He swapped out the real ones for, well, his versions, and then he'd start all over by cutting the ones he had stolen. At one point, when I hadn't heard from him in a long while, I stopped by his parents' house and found him in the garage. He set up his own little movie studio there, complete with a drawing board. He was actually animating entirely new content. All at once, I was both blown away by his artistic skill I haven't seen before, and very, very concerned about this guy. I'm like, when was he gonna come out of this dark place and start acting normal like the rest of us? He'd barely looked up from his drawings as we spoke, and I asked him what any kid in their late teens would have asked. Hey, man, what the fuck's wrong with you? Seriously, this is some crazy shit. It's work, man. I'm working, just as smart as anyone else's. Are you even selling these anymore, or are you just sneaking them into places? How much is this all costing your dad? Don't care. I quickly took a glance at what he was fervently illustrating. Is that a headless body dancing? Yeah. It's pretty dark, man. Yeah, I know. That's the point. I don't get it. Those tapes? Yeah, I thought they were wrong, but over time, I figured out the truth. Which is? That scary stuff? It's right. The happy endings is what's the true lie. He just kept drawing as I stood there. The silence was disturbing, and the moment I could smell BO coming off of him. It wasn't just sweat either. It was the mingling of that foul and ass and piss-soaked cloth. I hate to say it, but I gave up on him after that. It's the moment when you look at someone and you thought you knew him, and all you can think is, holy shit, I never thought they were this far gone. It wasn't until I was in my 30s when Sid crossed my mind again. I was pursuing the internet and just aimlessly wandering the web, and I came across a series of urban legends about strange VHS tapes of recut movies and lost episodes. Some of them I actually recognized, and I watched them with Sid. I actually seen him in the middle of working on one of them. Every disturbing scene of these, well, unbelievable antics. I believed it. I believed them because I had been there. Others, like SpongeBob cartoons and episodes of iCarly or whatever. Yeah, those shows came long after I made my break with Sid, but the style was all too familiar. Even the ones that didn't sound like his work seemed like they could have been broken copies or attempt at mimicking his work. He was still doing it. My God, it boggled my mind. I called Sid's old number up, and I was not entirely sure if I'd still find him there. It rang for minutes on end, and I knew that the search was hopeless. Even if he still lived there with his parents, it wasn't likely that they'd still all be at the same house. So many years had passed by. Still, I made it a point to drive to his old place, to see if he was still in the garage, cutting tapes or manipulating them via computer, or whatever he'd be up to. When I passed by the house, the unkept lawn was overgrown with huge, waist-high weeds. The dilapidated facade of the house, with its peeling paint on the shutters, missing roof tiles, and musk-filled gutters, told me no one had lived there in a long time. I saw a note on the door, but I couldn't read it from the road. Maybe it was something I could use to locate Sid, or see if he ever gotten help that I realized I now should have given him. Pulling into the driveway, my headlights illuminated the garage door. It was windowless and had been vandalized with some gangster tags of some traveling band of assholes. The note on the door, as one might expect, spoke of a certain bank owning the property. It noted that trespassing was heavily discouraged, and that at a certain point it would be out, and someone would be out to see the house was winterized, or whatever the hell that is. As I walked back to the car, defeated, something was still nagging at me. I knew Sid's parents kept a spare key under a false rock by the back of the stairs, basically by virtue of Sid locking us both out on several occasions. When I found a key, I sensed a cold, gnawing dread swirling in my stomach. Who would have moved out and left everything in place like this? The key was the most obvious thing, but flower pots and long decorations were still there. Hell, Sid's old rusted-out Huffy bike was leaning against the house and had created thick, rusty streaks along the aluminum sidings. I don't even know what I expected to find, but using the key, I entered the house. The smell was overwhelming. It's not a putrid smell, but nothing rotten or decaying, just a smell of... I don't know how it would make any sense to you, but the smell of electricity, like burning dust on a light bulb or heater, giving off a peculiar warmed metal odor. That was the least of my concerns, however, as I saw everything just as I had left it. Everything Sid's family owned was frozen in time. The dining room table we'd all sat on, and on many occasions, was dust-covered and supported an emaciated dead rat, which had been all but turned to dust. The television, that bulky, oversized television set we'd all sit around and watch Sid's tapes, and laud at his creativity. It sat where it always had been, slightly displaying the violent bombardment of black and white static. As I moved through the rooms, the sense of discomfort within me only grew. Every fiber of my being was shouting, "Run! Run, you fucking idiot!" Still, I pressed on into Sid's room. It was now empty and in despair. His prized action figures and black videotapes and hundreds of videotapes. Stale and water damaged. I almost wanted to call out, to shout for Sid, and wait for him to appear, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I went into his parents' bedroom. There, lying in the bed, were two motionless bodies, gaunt, gray, and half turned to dust, just like the rat in the dining room. I could scarcely believe in what I was seeing with my own eyes. Not only were the two dead bodies slowly dissipating within its own confines of its idyllic suburban household, but nobody had even checked on them. Nobody had discovered this until now. My mind raced. My heart raced. The only thing that wouldn't move were my feet, which remained glued to the spot. Sid, I thought, must have done this. There was no way the two of them would just lie down at night and then simultaneously die of natural causes. Sid had said that he didn't care about his parents, and when was the last time I'd seen them? God, I hadn't seen them for maybe days or weeks since I last talked to Sid. When I finally left the room, I took out my cell phone and began dialing 911. However, as soon as I lifted it to my head, an ear-splitting shriek of interference caused me to nearly fling the object across the room. I rushed to the kitchen phone. It was spewing static. I tried leaving the room. The phone just, again, static. It wasn't until I put the receiver back down that I heard it. Music. Faint, barely audible music. I hadn't noticed before, but it seemed to be repeating a melody. Happy and light, some fluence, maybe of a horn section. I followed the peppy tune in the house door of the garage, pressing my ear to the door's dirty surface. I determined the music was indeed coming in from just beyond. "Sid?" I called out, barely managing to form the name with my cold, bloodless lips. "Sid, are you there? Are you alright?" I then tried the door to find it only somehow locked from the other side. It was no matter, since one wild kick nearly knocked the rotting wood off its hinges. "Sid!" I shouted as the dust slowly cleared. Through the haze, I could only see the light of a television screen in vibrant colors of blue, green, and yellow. Soon I could make out a cartoon playing on the screen, then silver wires running from the set itself to a dark mess. And then the dark mess took shape as my eyes adjusted to the odd lighting. It was Sid. Or rather his body, not dead nearly as long as his parents, seated in the old office chair. The wires from the television led directly into his body, eventually disappearing into several old, crusted over holes in his leathery flesh. Through a small worm-eaten opening in his ribs, I thought I could see metal inside of him. I walked over to Sid's side, holding my hand over my mouth out of fear of vomiting. His face was twisted into a hideous wide grin. His wide, empty sockets almost seemed happy, hooded by a pleased brow line. "Hi there!" I heard in a jarring voice. The voice was upbeat, high-pitched. It sounded almost like Sid, but different and bubbly and cartoony. I turned to the screen. The green grass and blue sky and yellow flowers, and Sid, a perfect caricature of him. It strolled along a infinite loop of a uptown cartoon background. It waved to me. "Sid. Oh God, Sid." The cartoon version of him turned his attention away from me and continued to merely stroll along the unending cycle of the backdrop. He pressed a shrub, then passed it again and again and again. The same blue bird, chirping happily, flew through the sky in a figure-8 motion. "Sid, oh my God." I shook my head, unable to comprehend the scenario. I should have never let you leave reality. I should have never let you leave. I thought about what Sid had done to his mom and dad, and I thought about how the bank would come by soon, and all this would come to light. I watched Sid for nearly a half an hour. Then, I unplugged the TV set and simply left. Oh God, what have I done?